Hello and welcome. Glad you can join us today. I'm going to be talking with Marcus LeGrand, who has a great story and lots of good information and a really important perspective on some of the topics around what we've been talking about in terms of racism and preserving the real history of what's happened in this country for educators to teach. So Marcus, I met Marcus because I was doing some research for my book, and I really wanted to get some local readers, to take a look at the book and give me some feedback on what was I missing, because as a white guy talking about racism, I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing. And then Marcus's name just kept coming up. You got to talk to Marcus. You got to talk to Marcus. You got to talk to Marcus. And finally, I just reached out to Marcus. Marcus, I guess I was on email, right?
Yeah, I
and
think
just
it was. Yeah, it was email. Yeah.
Yeah, or some LinkedIn or something. I just said, "Hi, this is who I am, and I understand you're somebody I should talk to." I was thinking it was going to take it was going to be a lot harder to get to you than it was, and you're like, "Great, let's talk." So Marcus is the executive board member, an executive board member, and the chair of a group here called the Fathers Group, and we're in Bend, Oregon. He's also the director and co-chair of the Bend Lapine School Board. That's the school board for the area that I live in, he and I live in. And he's also the Afrocentric coordinator for Central Oregon Community College. In addition to that, he's on faculty at the Central Oregon Community College in the business department. And I'm finding out, is also a referee for basketball, for football in the area. So super involved member of our community, doing an amazing amount of work. And I'm actually kind of embarrassed that people had to point me in your direction. But I'm really, really glad that you're here. And I'm really honored. I was honored to have you take a look at the book, and you gave me some really good feedback. I just want to start off by tell us a little bit more about all those. So what you do a lot, man.
Yeah, my wife says the same thing. You get involved in a lot of things.
Yeah.
But it goes back to me. I think it stems from when I was growing up as a kid. I watched my grandmother and my grandparents and my mom and all my aunts and uncles and cousins just work so hard to be able to have a lot of the things they want. And that work ethic came from my grandmother being involved in so many different things. Like it was the standard that you help with the voting registration. It was a standard that you help cook and work around the farm and do all different things. So and just make sure that her house and the property that we had was taken care of. So watching that as a young kid, it was phenomenal. I grew up in a household where there was a lot of nurturing, a lot of education. So that's why I do all those things. My grandmother always mentioned your services to the people in your community, and you got to be humble and selfless in your acts and not look for recognition, just do the work. So everything I do is geared toward making sure the students, especially and their families, have a unique and awesome experience in this community.
Yeah. Marcus, would so of all the things that you do, it seems like when you sit down next to somebody and you have to do kind of the elevator conversation, like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you say?
I would say when someone asks me, what do you do? I say a lot of things, but mostly I am an educator. I am an activist. And most of all, I am just a leader who have the willingness to do the work.
Great. Yeah, and two things you and I have in common is I would class myself as an educator and an activist. I'm kind of a corporate activist in some ways. So yeah, well, that's great. Well, gosh, there's a lot to talk about. Let's start with education, and let's go ahead and start with kind of something that's been near and dear to me recently, which is what to do about and how to deal with the backlash we're seeing around critical race theory, which of course people don't, the definition that people are using is, please don't tell me about something that's going to make me uncomfortable. That's really what they're saying when they say critical race theory, because we all know critical race theory actually is not about that. It's not about trying to make anybody uncomfortable. It's about saying that racism and many of the isms are systemic, which means they're really hard to take apart. You can't just take them apart by telling people not to do them. Right. So yeah, go ahead.
And in adding to that, sorry to interrupt. And adding to that, it's a social construct. That's what race is, right? It's just a social construct that someone concocted and just said, hey, here's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to isolate and separate. In terms of it, it's not really also are not about our biological differences.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think we get away from that sometimes. It's not about the physical, it's not about the intelligence that you have. It's mostly about the laws and the institutions that govern a lot of the things we do.
Right.
In addition, it was predicated on the fact that people with lighter skin, had a different advantage than other people. And unfortunately, we still deal with that to this day. And
Right.
it doesn't just stem from those policies and procedures. It even works within our own communities too.
Yep.
Right? The various communities. Because I know there's some dark-skinned whites and some dark-skinned Latinos and some dark-skinned Blacks or Haitians or Africans, all to deal with so many different dynamics when it comes to this. And it's ingrained in us, it's almost like we have Stockholm syndrome to a certain extent about some of these things, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, wait a minute, hold on a second. It's almost like you're taught to hate your own. And it seems like what it is. But I think we got to get back to the key component of what it is. You got to look at your policies, how they govern you, and how you can basically make changes with the organization. When people hear DEI, and that, you and I talked about this a little bit, when you hear the word DEI, people just don't want it. What it is just gives people an excuse not to say race.
Right.
Or not to talk about race.
Right.
But it makes you dig deeper and go, hey, why is this policy set up this way?
Right. Right.
Why is it that I only notice that there's only white males or white males and a few white females at certain hierarchical positions? Why is it there's more diverse? Why is it more disabled people? Why is it there are people who are LGBTQ in these positions to have a different perspective that comes about? So for people to think that we really are just trying to throw something in their face to make people feel bad, I think they totally misunderstand exactly what this looks like.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. And I don't think anybody's fooling themselves here. I think, the idea behind critical race theory, I have to say that about turning it into something to try and eliminate what gets taught in schools was actually brilliant, because nobody really understands what critical race theory is. One, two, we don't want our kids learning something that's a theory, because that sounds like it's a practice. So it was a really great brand to kind of, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, I'm saying this is a bad thing. It was a really good brand to create, to say, let's just call everything we don't want taught critical race theory. Anything that has to do with discrimination, social justice, civil rights, let's call it critical race theory, so that we don't have to talk about, so no, a white person doesn't have to say, I'm uncomfortable with our schools teaching our kids about the civil rights movement, because so much of it makes me as a white person feel uncomfortable and guilty. Let's have that conversation. Let's have the honest conversation. But if we put it all under critical race theory, we can avoid saying what's really true. In particular, it can help whites avoid having to talk about what we're uncomfortable about.
Yeah, but at the same time, too, it teaches people also not to be inquisitive. That's another piece of it, too. I mean, that's the thing I think we've gotten away from in education. It's not just the students to be inquisitive. Well, we'll talk about the students in a minute, but educators as well. We've taught educators not to be inquisitive. We've asked them to teach the test to a certain extent. But here's the thing, no one pushed back. They pushed back and didn't ask the right questions. Why are we testing to the test? Wait a minute. How about we teach from a different assessment standard? Or how can we figure out how we can help educate and make it more so people can take practical understanding and then put it into action? I think that's the critical piece. Another thing too, here's what I'm trying to figure out how we can change things too. Just like you and I have to say white person, we all have melanin unless you're albino, right? For the most part, right? So why are we calling it white, black, this, that, and the other? Yes, don't get me wrong. I know you should see those things. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is realize that some people are just lighter, some people are just darker, some people are this, but they're just human. And that's the verbiage and different things we got to start having those conversations. I don't like calling you a white male. I want to be able to say, hey, what's up, Jim? You see what I mean? And just go from there. Yes, you're lighter than me, but at the same time, you're no different than me in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
And I think those little small differences is what we got to start looking at and how we can maybe have those better conversations. So what I'm trying to change really quick is, how can we have those conversations to say it? You're not white, dude, you got melanin. So if you say you are white, then what is white culture, right? Can you define that, right? If there's no white culture, then what is your culture? Okay, did it come from Scandinavia? Did it come from Europe? Where did it come from? Right. So we'll talk about those things.
Right. Yeah. It's just like any other social group, identity kind of designation. white or black or anything else. It talks as if it's a monolith. Like we always, and people say men and women of color, as if everybody who's a person that has more color in there, to use your point, that has more melanin or darker melanin than I do. It's like to call them everybody people of color is like to say they're one group. And of course they're not. There are multiple cultures and multiple groups. And the thing for me about what you're saying that's really important, well, there's a lot about what you're saying that's important, but one element of it is this concept of whiteness is the thing I notice in the United States is most white people, when you start asking them to describe culture, they'll describe cultures, usually other cultures. Even I, growing up in Northern Virginia, and my dad was like, he worked at the Smithsonian, so we spent a lot of time talking about cultures. I learned about everybody's culture except my own, right? There was no reference to white culture, even though I learned classical music, I learned music from Europe and all that stuff. It was just considered classical music and music from Europe. There was no assignment. It's like, this is white Christian people's music. But I grew up learning white Christian people's music. And it was just, in my family, that was just called music, as if there was no difference. So, and I actually think, and I give white people in this country a little bit of a pass on some of that, because I think most of us aren't aware of our own culture. So when I say I think there is a white male culture in this country, and it's got many components and it's very different, but a lot of people that are part of the culture usually don't even know it exists. They just think everybody has the same advantages. Right. So yeah.
Most definitely. I was just saying most definitely.
Yeah. The other thing, though, I'll say about it, I agree with what you're talking about, is that it is an intellectual construct. But another thing I hear from white leaders a lot is I'm colorblind. Right. I don't see, and I remember as a white leader, I can remember saying that when I was running a school in Florida. I was like, hey, I don't see color. I don't see gender. I don't see age. Of course, all I was noticing was color, gender, and age. Right. And I'm going to treat everybody as if those things don't matter, which of course was my way of saying I want to treat people fairly. So I think we got to be careful to say we're all the same, because your lived experience growing up in the Southeast and my lived experience growing up in the Southeast were probably radically different. And one of the reasons probably has to do with the color of our skin.
Oh, yeah, for the most part. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, they're never going to discount that. But one thing I do want to go back on before we go a little
go. Yeah.
Is when you talk about it's not a theory, there's a part of me has to push back in the sense to say it is a theory. It is a theory that white supremacy is a theory, right? Okay, colonialism.
I would say that's a fact.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Fact, right. Is colonialism a theory of how we should systematically do things? Because you see how it basically went and infiltrated a lot of different nations in the world, right? So we can look at imperialism, we can look at capitalism. They're theories, but they're actually put into practice in a way where basically I think it takes away from the people who are doing most of the work, or penalized for a lot of those things, who are just trying to make a living. So that'd be the only.
I want to say I agree with that. What I meant was they said critical race theory to try and kind of minimize it as if it wasn't real. Right. And what you're just talking about, those social phenomena are real. They're tangible. They happen. To me, they're more than a theory. So the whole use of the word theory was in some ways an attempt to minimize all of it, is what I was trying to say. And I want to ask you about that before we go on. I remember when the school board elections were going on and stuff, there were a couple of candidates who were really pushing the anti-critical race theory stuff. Mm-hmm. So how, as an educator and an administrator and a leader, how are you dealing with stuff around CRT in the community? Where does it show up, and what's your advice?
My advice is just like anything: push back, ask questions, get clarifying questions. I always look at it like this: like when I was running, and when some of my other fellow board members were running, we asked for debates, we asked for opportunities to engage, and no one showed, or no one wanted to be a part of it. So it gives you one frame of thought. Then when they bring these things up saying we're doing these things, I'm one of those people who said the first thing I go, can you show me the proof? Show me the facts. Where is it happening in actually your child's? If you had a person in the school district, and that's a lot of things people don't get. A lot of the people who were pushing back on us don't have kids in the district. Okay. So you know what I'm saying? So it was one of those things too. Some do, but many didn't. So do me a favor, tell me, where is it actually happening? Right? Show me. Because the curriculum is something that the state we have to get, approved by the state. So we have to show those curriculums and turn them in. So show me in the curriculum where we're showing you this is what's happening, this is what's going on. And then all of a sudden you say, okay, I want to pinpoint a certain amount of books, but every book that you're pinpointing is done something that's by a Black author or by a person of color or whatever. So how can that be part of your curriculum if these students aren't even getting these books yet, or even got to that level of being able to have those conversations, right?
Right.
So how can you talk and say this is happening? I always ask those clarifying questions. Additionally, what I do is this: if they can't bring facts or stuff to me and show me, then I go, okay, if you get proof and show that's what we're doing, we'll gladly take a look at it and move on from there, right? Also,
Right. And that would be like the assertions that teaching about enslavement is traumatic for children.
right.
Like, let's not teach that because we'll traumatize our kids.
Right,
Right.
exactly. And see, for me, I'm more like, okay, if we are going to talk about enslavement, because it's not slavery, it's enslavement. We weren't slaves, we were enslaved, we were brought here. So think about it for a second. If we want to talk about enslavement, let's not always go back to 1619, because Africa is more than that, right? Africa was bigger than that. You brought some of our biggest and brightest to this to be a part of what you were trying to build here. So just like what DeSantis is doing in Florida by misrepresenting what we're trying to do, same thing
Right.
happened. So now you got us here and you told us this, but then something else happens, right?
Right.
Tell that truth. That's the truth, right? A kid will understand, a student will understand that, right?
Right.
You telling them the truth and you can frame it in a way that is not going to change the way they see it. Might also not saying change the way they see things, but at least gives them more information or understanding, right?
Right.
Now, if their parent says, hey, I don't want my kid learning about this, you have the option to opt out of the lesson. And we have, procedures in for that. However, your kid's going to have to still do the project.
Right.
So you're not getting out of learning. But if you really want to be a little bit more well-rounded as a person, I suggest just listen and tune in and do the work, just like you're asking anyone else to do. Because I always look at it like this. If I have a student in my school district and I see that they're going to travel the world or go to other places in our country or live, work in other parts of our country, I want them to be equipped to be able to have conversations with people from so many different backgrounds. Let's prime example. You went to school when we were in kindergarten, elementary school, you had all types of kids running around, correct? You didn't care about who you were playing kickball with. You didn't care about who you're playing tetherball with, who were on the swings with. You just played. But it seemed like all of a sudden there was a separation somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
We start looking at people differently. You start, I guess, maturing or listening to the conversations you had at home. Or, hey, mom, I want to bring Marcus over. Who's Marcus? He's the Black kid in my class. He's not coming over to my house. And that's all they say, right? Well, let's talk, not, hey, let's talk to his mother and see if we can figure something out. Let's make it happen. Let's arrange it, right?
Right.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? I want students to be able to have that, because I can challenge all those people who are pushing back and go, okay, you say you're a person of God and you say you want all these things, but how many people do you have of color that come to your house on a regular basis that you interact with?
Right.
Crickets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How many people have you invited to dinner, on vacation, in your family? I'm not talking about the trip you went to Africa and did one thing. I love your philanthropic, endeavors. However, what did you do when you got back?
Right.
So
Yeah.
no, you can't come try to say this is going on in our schools and you can't bring tangible, credible things that's going to allow for us to be able to look at and say, okay, that's something we
Right.
need to look at.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that we're not taking that. I think you and I talked about this in the pre-interview. We're not taking this on directly. It's like somebody, maybe it was you, but if somebody recently said, and this is true, the people that are trying to nullify the real history of racism in the United States, they actually have a handbook on how to do it. Right? There's a handbook for people that want to dispute critical race theory and dispute what we're teaching our kids. Until I wrote Gaslights and Dog Whistles, there's been no book standing up for all of that, right? And there are leadership development programs for the other side to help understand how to disrupt public education and how to continue to block having the real history of what's happened taught. There has been no effort on our part to create leadership specific to how to talk about this topic. So what we typically do when we hear somebody start, like when I remember in not your race, but in the school board races, the critical race theory people, I just kind of blew them off. I just said, that's just nuts. There's no factual basis for what they're talking about. We just need to move on. I actually don't think that strategy is a good one. I don't think pretending it doesn't matter works. I think it's better that we do what you're saying, which is to say, so I understand you're afraid. What are you afraid of exactly? Where is the trauma? Where is the inaccuracy of what we're teaching? Where is it bad for our kids? Can you give us some examples? And of course they can't. So to me, the part of it is like, if there's just enough of us asking those kind of questions and willing to stand up to it, to some scrutiny and some critical thinking, I think we can help that group learn to pack up and try something else, because there's no factual basis for it.
But at the same time, too, it's one of those things too. I realize still I gotta engage, right? Like, hey, if
Yeah.
they come to me with stuff, but here's what I'm noticing. What happens is after you do what I said, which I've done with a few of them, they don't come to me again because I've shut that down.
Right.
And then I'm
Exactly.
like, okay, so then you go another route, you do something else. The tactic now is to try to opt out of everything, to try to say, here's a form that my organization created to say my student can opt out of whatever, but it's not state approved and this is not our opt out form. They try to
Right.
say, hey, they want the principal to say, here's the things we want you to do this. They can't do it without us as the board.
Mhm.
So this principal can't do that. So
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like, someone's taking the time to say, hey, we want to carve this up and say, hey, this is an official document saying that my kid can opt out of everything. No, that means you got to go to private school.
Right.
So
Right.
then if that's the case, go to private school, go ahead and pay those dollars to do so. Well, I'm a taxpayer. Well, I'm sorry that you are a taxpayer, but based on what taxpayers are paying for public school, here's what we offer. If you want to opt out of a specific thing, here's our policy, here's where we go. So think about it. You're taking the time to be that nefarious. Think about it. There's a national-wide push to do that. And yes, I will be very critical of the Dems too. You need to do a little boasting too, but at the same time too, it's okay to tell people no. It's okay to do the similar things, right? It's okay to go, hey, you know what? We're not doing that. Here's what we're doing. I'm writing an
Right.
executive order for this.
Right.
I'm writing an executive order for that. And just do it. What's
Yep.
stopping you? Well, Congress needs to go. Let's stop playing the fair game. Just do the right thing, as I always say. You know what they're trying to do is wrong. Instead of you
Right.
stepping up to it, I always say you're just as complicit if you're not willing to go, no, we're not doing it. Here's exactly what we're doing, and
Right.
then pass it.
Right.
That sometimes I have a push for the Democratic side, is that you're saying that, hey, you don't like this, but come out loudly and say you don't like it, and then put something in place. Don't just say, oh, well, we that's not what we do, and then sheepishly just go over here. No,
Yeah.
stop being reactive. Be just as proactive as they are. Prime example, I was listening to commentary with, I think it was a person who had just been elected to the Congress or the Senate this past election last year. And they said soon as they were elected, they're African American, actually they're Black American. And because a lot of us, we're African descent, but we're not actually from Africa. We're just Black Americans. He was saying, soon as I was elected and I got into my office the very first day on Monday, I had 10 women who were from the opposing group standing there with a list of 10 demands.
Wow.
Like, I want these things done. And they kept coming back every Monday, and every Monday. Why don't we do the same things? I want better hospitals in my community. I want my Black community to not be a food desert. I want blah, I want this. Hey, I want the George Floyd bill. I want healthcare for all. Hey, this is what I want. We want same things. And if you can't do these things as an elected official, and yes, I'm an elected official, guess what? Then we will find someone who will do these things. That's where I'm getting to. It's like, you're saying we can't do this, can't do something. Actually, you do have the power to do it, because we just saw the other half do it, right? So, you know what I mean? So that's where I have problems sometimes with this situation. That's where I always get a little like, okay, you're just as complicit then, because you are not willing to stand up for what we just said.
Right. And the other thing, and this is my work, not your work, my work being people like me, I think, is we do have a lot of white people, I think, who feel disenfranchised because they didn't grow up with some of the advantages kids like me had, middle-class kids. They grew up poor. And then when I start talking about privilege, and they're like looking at me going like, I don't know who you're talking about, but I don't have any privilege, right? It's hard for them to be open to that idea. It's hard for them to be accepting of the possibility that their lives are different than mine. And I think part of what they're reacting to and part of the backlash is actually white people who are angry at other white people who've classed them down. We've looked down our nose at them and saying, well, that's just ignorant. That just doesn't make sense. We've dismissed them. And that's not good for anybody. So part of the work is inside my own group, I think, is for us to figure out how to lift everybody up. Yeah. And not have because we do have a lot of people who they just take their cards off. Ben Lapine right now, over 1,000 kids apparently, fewer in school, many of which apparently are pulling out of school because their parents don't want them to learn critical race theory.
Actually, it's not 1,000. It's less than that.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Oh, way less than that.
Oh, good.
So we get those demographic numbers and we go, what's going on? But here's
it could be COVID, could be a lot of things, right?
Here's a lot of things that people don't get in terms of education piece. We're in COVID. So now you basically ask teachers, administrators, even students and families to be able to adjust the way they learn. Now we're getting ready to go back to school in different ways. Now you have a student who's accustomed to doing stuff online, right? Some mental health concerns because they were sheltered and that's not what they're used to, because as a system, our schools were a system. You show up, you do your thing, you whatever. Then also teachers became very creative in how they educated, right? Learn different ways, different systems. Like I talked about earlier, they became inquisitive again, right? Then now you're saying, let's go back into the standard classroom, what we were doing. And students are going, wait a minute, since I've been gone, I've been dealing with mental health, all this race talk, all this stuff that's been going on. And I am different in how I learn, right? I don't want to just sit here and listen now. I want to engage in a different way. And we're having to make that shift. Some parents realize some students are not going back because they're struggling, right? They're trying to figure out what's going on. And I watch it a lot on campus. They're finally starting to come out of their shell. Number two, what I'm noticing too, from a lot of families, they have an option now because childcare was a critical issue here in our community, right? So they stayed home and they realized, I'm home with my kid. I'm going to stay remote. I don't have a problem with this, right? And I have the option to do hybrid and send my kids sometimes because schools are starting to do that. Additionally, some families said, hey, I can work remote and homeschool my kids, right? So people have more options now in that regard because they've been using their resources differently. I'm noticing that small family or like groups of educators or people are getting together who are former educators are getting together because they still have their credentials and creating their own little pockets of stuff and helping with homeschool, right? Because you remember, we live in an affluent area here in Bend. So you got to understand it's a little different. So they have those means, but we noticed also a lot of people came back.
Oh, yeah, good.
A lot of students came back because they were missing the social aspect. They missed their friends. And then also being very expensive as well. Families couldn't afford what they were dealing, so they had to.
Right.
But we have to make that shift as a community too, because now it's not just education. We have to have a place for students to be able to go from a social emotional standpoint, right? How can we adjust that? Additionally, how do we build relationships with our students? How do we also look at how we can help them be able to find agency? Or how can we help them understand how to build relationships and teach them a little differently? So those adjustments are being made.
Right.
I love it because now the student's voice is coming out more and family engagement has changed and relationship building is at an all-time high. And I really appreciate that's the shift that we're making.
Good. Well, Marcus, to wrap up the part about you as an educator, what advice do you have for all of us about what do we do to, I mean, everybody's so concerned about education, about the mental health of the students and the teachers and the administrators. On top of that, which we don't have to get into, we've got gun violence, even in our town, which we had mass murder 3 weeks ago in our town, which was a first for us in that way. So, all of us want to do what we can to support education and educators. What do you think we need to be aware of?
3 things I think we should be aware of is that please reach out to your fellow educators and find out what they need. They need your support because these educators work really hard on a daily basis. And I think we overlook what they give to our families and to our community. Think about it. Our students are with them 7-8 hours a day, right? Think how long they get them. So a lot of the work is on them, but unfortunately they're not being compensated for them. I'm trying to figure out what is a way we can definitely compensate them better for what they do, or figure out ways to be able to engage that way. Education in our country, our teachers in our country have been vastly underpaid, a lot of different trades, but that's one of the ones. Number two, let's figure out ways to continue to support students and listen to their voices, please. Students are resilient, especially prime example. They understand how pronouns work better than most adults do.
Amen.
Grandma, grandpa, us, we have the problem as adults because that's not how we were raised, right? We were taught boy, girl, that's it. But you got to get beyond that, so that's what these students understand. They got it nailed. You talk about pronouns. It was so funny. Listen to my 12-year-old daughter tell my 10-year-old son, hey, here's what pronouns are. And she goes, what is this? What is this? What's this he, they, the, what? And she explained it to him. He goes, okay, got it. That's all he said.
Right.
And he runs with it from now on. He knows it, understands it, and he can articulate it quicker than most adults can.
Yeah.
So that listen to our students. They have a lot of great information they want to give us. And then finally, be able to lean into the difficult conversations. Please be able to willing to educate your kid. Think about it. As a person, as a young person, I was taught to learn as much as I can about many different avenues in the world. As a young adult, and as like I said, a maturing adult, I was able to work in the corporate America, work now in education, and do various things and learn much more there and be able to understand and fine tune who I was. But now that I'm older, I'm over 50 now, and now it's time for me to give back in the things I've learned. So what I'm saying is, if you're a former educator, if you're a person who's out here with the means and the resources to help, or just want to volunteer, please lean into having these difficult conversations and help support a lot of what's going on, so we don't have to continue to deal with some of the crazy rhetoric that we have to.
I love the third point, which is you need us to be you need us to stand with you when you're having difficult conversations. You don't need us to take over. You don't need us to do your job for you, but we need to be with you and stand up and speak out about some of this, which is hard and feels scary. But it's like, welcome to your world, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's scary, but I think it goes one of those things I always tell people: we're just trudging a path for, making sure that we have a space for all this. That's all we're trying to do. And we're not trying to change you and make you into something that you don't want to do. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying, hey man, just listen a little bit.
Right.
Here's bottom line, I think, what it boils down to. And most of all, and I think we can put this on a lot of things. And I'm not faulting just males, because we have a large population of people who need to, and women as well, need to look into this. But from a male perspective, I think how we can help people too, especially whoever's going to be listening to this at what level, is if we can put some of our male misogyny aside and just lean into some of this and have a listen and understanding, then we hope they could be better off. Because think about it, you didn't know until you, prime example, I had a friend who just got divorced, and he goes, I didn't realize until I got divorced how much I appreciated what I had. It shouldn't take that. That's what I mean by put your misogyny aside and realize and live and embrace what you have and cherish it and just enjoy it.
Yeah. And of course, that's hard because many men, all of us have where we were brought up and socialized in a sexist, a way of kind of sexist thinking and misogynistic thinking that we're not even aware of. So you ask a man to put his misogyny aside, sometimes he's like, well, I'm not sure I know what that looks like. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing about that. But that's a really good segue for you to help us to understand a little bit more about the Fathers Group. I want you to talk about that. And for those people that don't know about the demographics of Bend, Oregon, we are kind of a drive-in mountain vacation community. You can fly here, but more than anything, people drive here from Portland or Seattle or other cities. And we have beautiful mountains and great breweries, and people come and hang out here. But the population is very white, like 94% white, with very small percentages of Latino, Latinx folks, Asian folks, and African-American folks. What I show, Marcus, is like 0.6% of our population are people that identify as African-American or Black. So the Fathers Group to me is important, not just because of what it represents, but what it is in Bend, right? Which is, I can tell you right now, it scares the shit out of some of the white folks.
Yep.
Okay. So why don't you talk about it a bit? You helped found it, and what is it, and what's it doing, and what do we need to know about it?
And so it goes back into, like I said, leaning into who we are. And like I said, back to the misogyny piece, like, step that aside. So we were a group of Black fathers who used to meet, monthly or quarterly sometimes, just to kind of have conversations and support one another. A lot of our kids were having issues in the schools. And instead of going and being the stereotypical, what they say, Black male, we didn't want to
Or
go
even worse, angry Black male.
that too. Like,
Right.
thank you for making it even more clear.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, how can we support you so we can definitely answer questions? So then me being an educator, I was like, hey, have you tried this? And we had other people who were involved, David Merritt, let me see, Dave Chisholm, Kelly Musgrove, Gordon Price, Dalton Miller Jones, let me see, and many others. With the early, Mosley Wada or Jason Graham. We all are probably the early people into, Ian Fraser as well. We're all the first people in it. So then we were just talking all the time. We were like, man, this is positive. We all can meet and talk and just have these heart-to-heart conversations. Then George Floyd was murdered, Breonna Taylor was murdered, and we're going, okay, we're Black men. What is our representation to support and show our families what we should be doing in this community? So we became a 501c3 in 2019, and we started figuring out what are the main three things that we need to work on, right? So number one was education. How can we help supplement some of the education that's in our schools? Because we were having students come up to me in my teachings and say, I'm 18 years old and I'm African American or Black, and I have never celebrated Black History Month.
Wow.
And I grew up here in Central Oregon. That's hard. And if people don't know the history of Oregon, I'll tell you that later. But we said, okay, we got to figure this out. So we started creating an after-school program called UGMA, and it's called Collective Work. And it's all our work to be able to work together to provide an educational setting for our students to thrive. Because many of us, when we were growing up as kids, we had these supplemental programs in our churches, in our community centers, so forth and so on. We had all these things in our communities. And it goes back to what we talked about, the CRT thing. You had Reagan, Nix programs, right? You had Reagan takeaway programs, and then you got Clinton coming with 3 strikes. So you think about it, you didn't have these places. So we said, let's create that type of enclave. The second thing, we looked at students who were in the juvie system or who were coming out of prison. What can we do in terms of finding resources for them? Because unfortunately, many of people who look like me and who are male are in jail or incarcerated in some capacity. And we've had a few members who actually experienced that, and they were like, we don't want that to happen to our kids. And then finally, small business and financial literacy is very critical to the community, the Black community. So how can we help small businesses get the resources and the things they need, but on top, understand why money is important and how it works within the community? So those are 3 pillars that we have. So we came together, we're all professionals, we're on the board, and we have a different type of board. It's not a board that just makes decisions. We all have our unique talents and we help in some capacity. I'm the educational chair. David Mary is in charge of the Bridge program, which helps the juveniles and people coming out of incarceration, along with Kelly Musgrove. We have the small business piece with Dave Chisholm and myself to kind of get that going as well. Plus Kelly owns his own real estate business.
Right.
So you see what I mean? So me doing my education piece, so and so on. And it just basically started working on those different attributes, indoctrinating students. I don't like to use the term indoctrinate, that's not correct. What I would say is helping them understand where they can make a difference in their community, but at the same time, figure out who they are and what they want to do. But most of all, build relationships with one another. Because here's the dynamic that a lot of people don't know about Central Oregon. Many of the students who are African American, Black, are from other countries here in Central Oregon.
Right.
Many are adopted. Many are from Africa, but they take on the weight of what happens to a lot of Black Americans. Then many are mixed race.
Right.
A lot of predominantly white moms, a lot of Black dads. Okay. Then there's only a couple Black teachers in our schools. We have 33 schools here in Central Oregon, and there is 3. Think about that. And the percentage in the state is supposed to be 10%, and you're supposed to get up to that number. We're trying to get there, but we're not. We're so far away. The next thing, it's expensive here. Trying to get new teachers and new people to come here is hard. Then you got to grow your own if you can do that, which we have in a program to grow your own. But back to the fathers group, we are trying to supplement some of those things so these students can see that, yes, there's people of color who actually teach in this community and can help you be able to move forward. That's why we did it.
Yeah, that's great. And I just was thinking about how powerful that statistic is. So everybody benefits from having culturally relevant role models. It's part of what school's supposed to do. And if you're a kid in this community and you're a kid of color, you're really unlikely to ever have a teacher that looks like you. And and you can say I'm sure a lot of people that look like me will say, well, that's not, it's not that big a deal. I didn't even really notice that I had white teachers. Well, you didn't have to notice that you had white teachers, because they were the same as you. So imagine growing up with, flip the script for a second. Imagine anybody who's white in the audience growing up and they never see a teacher that looks like them.
Yeah, exactly.
They never, ever, or talks like them, or has a background similar to them, or understands the history. That's incredibly powerful. How has the community been in terms of supporting the group, and what do you notice? I made that kind of snarky comment, but I remember the first time they met, there was a lot of stuff on social, and I was doing my own job around cancel culture. I was going, no, that's not what they're about. No, there was a lot of weird stuff at the beginning, but how is it now?
Just like anything else, they were like, okay, who's this organization? And then they're African-American led, right? People have realized we have women, yes, we have Latin, yes, we have white, whatever you're gonna say, less melanated, whatever you want to say in our group. They do a lot of the work. They're behind the scenes, just like all of us are doing the work too. So yes, and we've not exclusionary. So here's the thing that irritates me. It's like, it's the fathers group. It's not saying you had to be a father to be in the group. We're saying as fathers, we represent a lot of things. And we, like you mentioned, we're not a monolith as fathers, right?
Right.
Like, hey,
and it doesn't say Black Fathers Group.
No,
it says Fathers Group.
But most people think that because they
Right.
that's that Black Fathers Group. Wait a minute. You're a father. Why aren't you here? You have kids. And when you try to explain that to them, and I see, I always say this, you're willing to sacrifice and go camping or go paddleboarding or do this other philanthropic thing. But why is it as a father, you can't come and hang with other fathers? Because you don't mean to tell me you don't have concerns in your own household. You don't have a place you can come and just vent. You don't have a place you can come and see other people just like you. We're fathers. We got kids. All of us have 2 and 3 kids.
Right.
We're having to raise them. We go through the same trials and tribulations, how to communicate with them, how to talk with them, how to help them with their math, wow, how hard would that be? And also, hey, we have conversations about, hey man, sometimes we'll be like, hey dude, hey, how much cooking do you do at your house? Man, I'm learning. Hey, we're thinking about doing a cooking class. Cool, right? Hey, really quick, homework, having problems. I'm a single dad, struggling. Why don't you come and bring the kids with you? See how easy that is? Hey, really quick, hey man, this is the kind of stuff. These are all dads who walk up to us after they get to know who we are. Hey man, I'm really struggling with this. How can you help me with this? I'm raising a Black kid and he's adopted. Okay, how can you help you? What do you want to know? What is it? It's hair,
Right.
conversation. He's acting out and I don't know why. I said, well, have you had that conversation with him? And then they'll bring him to a meeting and they'll bring the son or daughter to the meeting and they'll start talking to us and they'll go, you ain't never talked this much about what happens to you at school. You can see the comfortableness,
Right.
kids relax.
Right.
And they're just like, I feel this. This is my tribe. Like, why haven't I known about this? How hard is that as people in this community? People push back so hard because they're scared of change. They're thinking that we're still less intelligent, right? They're still thinking that we don't have the capacity to do a lot of these things. So yeah, like for instance, we had Juneteenth. People showed up, great turnout. But the very next week or other weeks, you go to Munch and Music, you go to some of those celebrations downtown, places are packed with people from the community. Out Central Oregon had something, packed with people. Wait a minute, we're part of this community. Juneteenth is a national holiday. You get a day off. Guess what? Do you know the meaning behind Juneteenth? You don't know anything about it. Come learn, come figure out what it is. you found out what so-called Thanksgiving was. We don't call it Thanksgiving anymore. We call it Heritage Month now. Guess what? You take Columbus Day off, you know a lot about Columbus, even though we know it's a lie. Let me see, you know how to show up for Cinco de Mayo, even though that's not the actual independent revolution for the Mexican, population, or Latin population, excuse me. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you mean to tell me you can't come out and celebrate people who are American? We're American. Do you get that? We were born, raised here, and we built a lot of this country. So when people push back on that, you don't want your kids to learn or be a part of learning American history? Really?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So
Yeah.
like that's where I get the pushback. So why do you think we're gonna think we're gonna put your kids in a cage? Ooh, what? We're gonna teach them something they didn't know? What? Oh, well, this is gonna rub off and they're gonna start acting black all of a sudden.
Right.
I hate those stereotypes. So you don't want to come out and be a part of that? You
Yeah.
teach them something different and understand that your common man is doing the same thing you're doing. Well, now I want to stay over here in my bubble. I said, well, stay in your bubble. But at the
Right.
same time, be respectful and show up and do the same thing you want us to do. Our money and the things that we bring into the table and the various things that we try to contribute and be a part of, guess what? We want for our kids and all kids in the community. And guess
Right.
what? Most of us are chill about it. We're not even mad if you don't want to bring them, but if you do bring them, we're going to embrace them like they're our own.
Right.
But can we say the same for you as a community? If we bring our kids to you.
So it sounds like one of the best things anybody in Bend can do that is a parent is show up. As a father, show up. It's not about race or anything else. It's like show up. Right. And about how we are collectively helping to educate our kids. It takes it takes a town, it takes a village to raise kids, right? So how do we organize the village so that there's more of that happening? That's great.
And think about it from this term too, Jim. Think about it like this. It's like when we were enslaved from Africa, like I said, we had built the pyramids, did all these different things, and we came here. Do you think those enslaved people, they built cotton gins, they built all these different inventions to make their jobs and lives easier, right? And the so-called, plantation owner had none to do none of those things. So, but you benefited from it,
Right.
so forth and so on. So you mean to tell me if you thought we weren't intelligent and bright people, we harvest the ground, we cultivated ground that wasn't even tenable for the most part, but you expecting us to not have the brilliance to be able to help you do something?
Right.
I get so sick and tired when people say, who are you guys as an organization? They try to explain to us almost like women hate mansplaining. You're trying to explain to us what we should be doing and do it in the way we want you to simulate to what we want to see you be.
Right.
Insane.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Come be a part of this. We're not trying to, like I said, change the way you see things. We're just trying to enlighten you more.
Yeah. And not to white-splain or mansplain, but I do want to say part of what you said that I think is so important is getting everybody to think about how they show up together in how we do this, and to be aware of. I mean, you're right. I don't think a lot of people are aware of sometimes even how uncomfortable they feel. And instead of talking about them being uncomfortable, they just opt out. They just retreat, right? I mean, one of the things I talk about with white men is most of us have been acculturated for two kinds of feelings that are acceptable: anger or withdrawal, right? Either I'm out, I'm done, I don't like where you're going, so I'm going to move myself out of the conversation, or I'm going to pitch a fit and have a temper tantrum and then get everybody to listen to me. Those are the only two emotions that we understand and use societally. Where I think one of the things that's happening here around this stuff with race and gender in this country, for white guys at least, is it's hard not to feel ashamed. And so let's have that conversation instead of like canceling it, avoiding it, pretending it's not important, or marginalizing it and putting it down. Let's just own our feelings about the thing and say, I'm uncomfortable being here because I thought it was a Black fathers group. I'm hearing it's a fathers group, and that's great. And I'm not sure what that looks like right now. So what are you guys going to do? Throw me out because I say that?
No, you're not going to
yeah,
throw
exactly.
you out.
Of course
We're
not.
not going
Right.
to throw you out. We're going to embrace it and go, hey, let's change that up a little bit. Let's clarify
exactly.
that. Like I said earlier, let's clarify and have clarifying conversations. And like I said, the more we realize if we spend more time with each other, the more we have in common. But the problem is people want to stay isolated, which I have no problem with to a certain extent. If that's your choice, choose, go ahead and do that. But I don't need to hear about it. And people say, well, I don't need to hear about your race talk. But here's the problem. A lot of times we only can talk about these things because this is what most of the time affects a lot of the things we try to do. Even though you may not want to say it out loud, but it is, we understand everybody has their implicit like I said, unconscious bias. We get it, so.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. And that gets complicated because I had a colleague once that said something to me that was really powerful. A black man who's I love this man. And he said, if you don't see my color, you're not seeing all of me. Right. Because we are different. And if you think being colorblind works, well, okay, you're leaving out the lived experience of what my life in this country has been like. So we're kind of running out of time, but I want to take a couple of minutes because you had some awesome insights and wisdom around business and what businesses can do, and there are some really good models for community-based business. You talked about the Juno Care model and what's happening there. So tell us what you're thinking about that.
I think about it from this perspective, from business, like Juno Care. Thank you for bringing that up. I was listening to a pod, and this gentleman came on. I think his name is Matt Conwell II or something like that, and he's a venture funds guy. And he was talking about Juno Care. I think they're in Harlem. They basically create, I think they're Black-owned hospital, where they created a system for the families to be able to come and get the healthcare they need. Like I was mentioning, most Black neighborhoods in our country are densely populated to a certain extent, but at the same time, they have no grocery stores, right?
Right.
They don't have a lot of healthcare because many of them closed down. Like what they did in Chicago was just abominable. Excuse me. Now this organization is saying, let's come in, let's put these back into our communities, right? And let's have a system that is more conducive to what we need for us. Because in terms of mortality rate, in terms of hypertension, heart disease, all those different things, even birth is one of the most critical things when it comes to the Black community. And I'm not even going to talk about being shot and all those different things. They don't have a care facility in their communities. So guess what? They said, let's come in, let's do that. So if I go in with my family of 4, we all go in together and let's talk about our healthcare and so forth and so on. So we make points together. Additionally, you can be a member. So you also can be a member and receive other benefits. Additionally, what I like about it is that you can also pay your stuff up front, or you can pay before you leave, but you will get a bill before you leave. You're not getting one in the mail. So you know exactly what you're getting in terms of services. And many of these, I think the facility also, and I think they're up in others, where it's mostly Black doctors or people of color who are the doctors. And now they feel a little more comfortable to talk about those things, because historically, how we feel about hospitals and healthcare in general. And I think that's a great model to look at how we can continue to have conversations on how we can continue to build our communities back up. Because we know the Greenwoods, and we know, the Rosewoods of the world, and how we were bombed or we were redlined or whatever you want to say, or taken from intimate domain. But the thing we look at is going, how can we start building that again, right?
Right.
And it starts with trying to have our own wealth in our own communities. The average Black dollar lasts 1 minute in our community. That means we are large consumers. We spend $3 trillion on consumer goods all the time. And imagine if we had it stay in our community. You don't think that retailers and other people will be like, wait a minute, what happened to all that money we're making from the Black neighborhood? Because we're getting it from a fringe perspective, because we're not even targeting them. But you see what I mean? Think about it. A prime example, I was talking to a business here in Central Oregon, and I said, hey, how much of your business goes to people of color? And he says, 10%. And I go, okay, now let's break it down even further. How many goes to Black, Latino, whatever. And they broke down, I said, now imagine if you intentionally market to them instead of just your whole thing, and you did something behind it. Do you think you're going to lose other customer in your majority who you buy from? Or are you going to enhance this? Because one thing that I would give people of color credit for, if they are loyal to your product, they're loyal, especially if you're doing something for their community. They will make you look good, right? But if you come out and you say something bad about a community, we could shut down your whole thing that quick. That's another thing they don't realize too. That's the power we have in dollars and in our vote.
Right.
We don't use it enough. So when I say Black business, let's get back together, figuring out how we can create incubators, come up with a strategic plan to present not only to our lawmakers locally, regionally, state, and nationally. And then, like I said earlier, bring these 10 things to people and say, you're running for office. If we don't get 10 of these or 8, 9, however many we need to get, then let's go, right? In our businesses, work with the Black leaders to figure out what our needs are, what services we don't have. Let's look at Ben, for example. If you go to visit Ben website, there's no people of color for the most part on the website. And there's no list of anything you can do from a cultural perspective on any of the websites, right?
Yep.
To any Ben website, unless we go put something up on those sites and let people know about those events, you're not going to know, right?
Right.
If I'm a person, I'm coming to Ben for the weekend, I need to get my hair cut. Nobody knows where that's at. You know what I mean? Where is a spa that is LGBTQ or disabled or friendly for people of color to be able to go? Is there a spa that is strictly for that? Or spas that are welcoming of those things? See what I mean? So none of our Black, there's an internal, here's the thing, this is how far we've gone as a people of color. We have an internal Black or brown people list. Reason we don't put it out to the public sometimes is because we don't want to be targeted in a bad way.
Right.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Right. So you see what I mean? So
yeah.
We're a welcoming community and we
Right.
want to build these things. Let's figure out a way to do it together.
Well, I'm listening to you talk and I'm realizing there are probably people that are going to be listening to this going, well, that's great. So all these people of color want to get together and be in their own little group. Well, what about creating an inclusive society? And it's like, whoa, time out. Let's be clear. If I want to meet with people that look like my group, I just have to walk out the door, right? I don't have to do anything else. There is value in being with people of like origin, and it's worthwhile and it's necessary. And a while ago, you were talking about the fathers group and how some of those kids show up for your groups and they feel safe. Yeah. They're like, whoa, I've never had this feeling before because they've never been in a majority group of people that look like them. Yeah. So this is not about, creating more exclusion. This is about taking care of our own and nurturing everyone so that we can all be part of the community together. And part of that is understanding the need for groups to caucus on their own. Again, I caucus on my own with people that look like me all the time. We call it happy hour, right? Because I don't have to, I can walk out the street and go anywhere and I'll find a group of people that look like me. I don't have to work at it, right? So yeah. I just had to put that in because people will say, well, if we're all about inclusion, how come we're teaching people to take, how come we're talking about all these differences? And it's like, oh, come on, really?
But that's what I'm saying. That's that thing I said, you got to put your misogyny to the side and just think and look for a second. Wait a minute. Right. They want a place they can feel safe and do their own things. I was watching something on Netflix where they were talking about that. They were like, we didn't have a Black place to do comedy when we were in LA. And that's what the Comedy Store used to do. I think is Pauly Shore's mom did that. And they were like, so when the Rodney King verdict came down and they burned up the area, so now we don't have a place. But think about it. Soon as they were able to go to the Comedy Store on a Tuesday, nobody goes out on a Tuesday. They chose it on a Tuesday. It was the most popular night to go out for comedy was a Tuesday because it gave them a space to laugh and get all the stresses off, right? But at the same time, people don't realize that kept the Comedy Store afloat for years because the other nights weren't packing. But the Tuesday nights where all the Black comics and people of color, LGBTQ, transgender was all coming in, guess what? Blowing it up. And all of them are famous. You know a lot of the names now, right? Just for that reason, because they all got on, they got deals, they got different things. So the main thing for me is that you're saying we're going to be exclusionary. No, what we're saying is all we want these kids to have a place they can come back to, feel like they can do an internship, to have a job, have a place they can land where they feel comfortable and they know they're around people who are not just like-minded, but like them and feel safe and not have to have anything. And the reason I'm saying that is I think about it like this. We just had a young man who was murdered last year here in town. Black kid who from California was here out with his friends and just had a disagreement with a person. And now he's no longer with us. His anniversary of his death actually was this past week. Right. And the case is still pending. But that's crazy that's what we're saying. We want a place where this young man or people like him can come. After that happened, a lot of people who were in college or students were like, they felt unsafe to be able to go out and feel like they can go and do things. Kids talk about all the time how they're walking with friends and being called the N-word on a truck rolling by. We feel after we just had the mass shooting, how he was going to go do all these things and he wanted to take out a lot of people. That's unfortunate, right? That we had a student in our community have to go to those lengths to be able to, get not just attention, but understanding of what he was going through, right? There's so many different things that have happened since, but at the same time, we need to be committed to making sure that we can have these things in our communities for our kids.
Yeah.
So they feel safe and feel like they're welcome.
Yeah. Well, Marcus, thank you for all you're doing. And, my sense is, as much as you've already done, and you said you're like in your 50s, my sense is there's more left to do, and that you can see that. And so it's going to be really exciting to kind of follow you and watch what else happens. And I'm just so, as a member of our community, I'm just so proud that you're a part of it, and so proud that you're doing what you're doing with us and for us, and in some cases on us. Right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. And that's good, man. Yeah.
So really quick, coming in the future, one thing I'm looking to do, to extend the UGMA program into other regions of Central Oregon.
Good.
The other piece, who I was out there listening, all you HBCU grads, if you're listening, or just university grads or people, I'm really trying to figure out a way we can continue to leverage a bridge to take the students from here to be able to go to some of the HBCUs and other institutes that can help these students feel comfortable and be around people who look like us. What I would like to do with that program is having a student say, for instance, if they're in Atlanta and they want to come here for a summer symposium, and I take my kids there so they can see a difference, or at the Howard or to some of the Texas schools, definitely would love to be able to start doing that. Industry leaders out there, we need students to continue to have opportunity to be able to be a part and allow them to be able to think and have a space to feel comfortable to design and do things with unabetted, just be able to just create things so they can see how they can make a living. And then lastly, if you're listening as well, we always need help, not just philanthropically, but volunteers and people with the willingness to want to try to give back and help the community.
Well, that gives us lots of ways that we can get engaged. There is no excuse for not being involved after that. Marcus, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Take care, man.
You too.